The buzzing of cicadas filled the air, thick and constant, like a warning that the forest never truly slept. Deep in the humid jungle near the village of Kariper, a child sobbing broke through the natural noise, sharp and human, a sound out of place. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the canopy, casting long shadows over the tangled roots and mossy floor. It was the kind of sound that made even the animals pause, not a scream, not quite, but a steady, frightened weeping that vibrated with helplessness. Someone was out there. And something else was, too. Aru Patel had spent most of his 58 years in the same small village, working as a groundskeeper for a wildlife rehabilitation center on the edge of the jungle. He wasn't a ranger or a tracker, just a quiet man who trimmed hedges, fed rescued birds, and swept floors. Ever since his son's death in a motorcycle crash 5 years earlier, Aru had become quieter, moving through life as if walking underwater. People spoke to him gently now. They knew his silence wasn't rudeness, but weight. He carried loss like an extra limb, always there, always aching. That evening, he had taken a walk after work, something he rarely did anymore. The heat had been unbearable during the day, but now the forest was alive with evening calls. He followed a narrow path along a dry stream, thinking of nothing in particular, until he heard it, the crying. It wasn't loud, but it was close. He stopped, looked around, listened again. Then, without hesitation, he turned off the trail and pushed through the undergrowth, following the sound with his heart pounding harder than it had in years. He found her by a banyan tree, curled up on the ground, her school uniform damp with sweat and dirt. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Her hair clung to her face, her hands were scratched, and her eyes were wide with fear. But it wasn't the girl that made Aru stop dead in his tracks. It was what lay behind her, a massive Bengal tiger, its striped body stretched out in the grass, paws crossed, eyes watching. Not lurking, not stalking, just watching. The girl was leaning against its side like it was a giant pillow. Aru froze. The tiger didn't move. Its ears flicked once, then settled. The girl looked up at him, face flushed from the heat, and pointed at the animal. "He found me," she said softly. "When I got lost, Aru didn't know what to do." Every instinct told him to back away slowly, not to provoke, not to breathe too loudly. But the tiger didn't growl, didn't tense. It blinked slowly, like an old cat on a warm porch. The jungle was quiet now, as if holding its breath. And Aru, against every logic he'd ever lived by, stepped closer. The child's name was Mira, and she had gone missing that afternoon during a school field trip to a butterfly sanctuary near the jungle's edge. No one knew exactly how she slipped away, but she had wandered off while chasing a blue-winged butterfly, her curiosity faster than her teacher's watchful eyes. By the time anyone noticed, she was gone. Panic spread through the staff. Volunteers and parents were called in. Drones were launched. But after hours passed with no trace, hope began to feel like a luxury. Aru had no idea any of that was happening. He was just a man who stumbled upon a child and a predator coexisting in a way that defied reason. The tiger wasn't wounded. It wasn't hungry. It was simply there. It had been waiting for someone, or something. Mira stood up slowly, placing a hand on the tiger's broad shoulder. "He didn't let the monkeys come near me," she said matter-of-factly, as if describing a pet dog's loyalty. Aru looked at the girl's scratched legs, the mosquito bites on her arms, and then back at the tiger. He wasn't imagining this. He slowly pulled out his phone, trying not to make sudden moves. He dialed the sanctuary's emergency line, barely daring to speak above a whisper. "It's Aru," he said. "I found a child. She's safe, but there's a tiger with her." The person on the other end started to question him, but he interrupted, voice low and urgent. "No, listen to me. It's not attacking. It's protecting her." He gave the coordinates, then slipped the phone back into his pocket. Mira walked toward him calmly, barefoot, her small hand reaching for his. As she placed her hand in his, the tiger finally stood. Aaron's heart jumped into his throat. The animal towered over them, muscles shifting beneath its coat, powerful and silent. But it didn't charge. It didn't roar. It simply turned away, heading back into the forest like it had done its job. Mira looked back, her face filled with a sadness too mature for her age. "Will he come back?" she asked. Aru swallowed hard. "Maybe," he said. Maybe he already did what he needed to. He lifted her into his arms, legs trembling from adrenaline. By the time the rescue team arrived, the tiger was gone. No tracks, no sounds. Just the image of Aru standing in the clearing, holding the girl against his chest, sweat dripping from his forehead and tears in his eyes. When Mira's parents came running through the trees, screaming her name, she looked up at them like waking from a dream. Her mother collapsed in sobs, clutching her so tightly it looked painful. Her father could barely speak. How? He asked Aru. And Aru, who hadn't spoken more than 10 words a day for years, said quietly, she wasn't alone. Mira was checked for injuries, but other than minor scratches and dehydration, she was unharmed. As the group prepared to leave the jungle, she tugged on her mother's shirt. He didn't growl once, she said. He just looked at me and laid down. He knew I was scared. The rangers tried to make sense of it. Was the tiger once captive, trained, sick? But there was no evidence to support any of those theories. No sedation marks, no tags. No sign that this tiger was anything other than a wild animal who had chosen, for reasons unknown, to watch over a child. Back at the sanctuary, the staff couldn't believe what Aru had just told them. The girl was safe, yes, and that alone was reason to rejoice, but the part about the tiger, that defied every protocol, every understanding of predator behavior. It must have been confused, one of the vets said. Or old, maybe injured, but Aru shook his head. It wasn't confused. It knew exactly what it was doing. It wasn't weak. It was watching her. His voice was low, steady. And for the first time in a long while, people leaned in to listen when he spoke. That night, Mira lay in a hospital bed under observation. Her mother refused to leave her side, holding her hand tightly even after the child had fallen asleep. Her father stood at the window, staring out at the trees as if expecting the tiger to appear under the streetlight. Neither could understand how their daughter, their little girl, had made it through hours in the forest, in the middle of tiger territory, with nothing but a thin uniform and bruised feet. And yet, she hadn't just survived. She had been protected. Aru didn't sleep that night. He sat outside his small home, staring up at the black sky, the stars barely visible through the humidity. His mind raced back to that exact moment in the clearing, the way the tiger had stood, silently turned, and disappeared. There was no aggression, no fear. It was as if the tiger had known he would come, that it had been waiting for someone to take over. The image of his own son, Amen, flashed in his mind. A boy who once wandered into that same forest to release an injured bird. A boy who never came back. The next morning, news had spread across the region. Child survives night in jungle, the headlines read, saved by tiger. The photos showed Mira clinging to her mother, her small face pressed against her shoulder, and beside them stood Aru, tired, overwhelmed, but somehow lighter. For years, he had been known as the quiet widower who kept to himself. Now, children were pointing to him in the market, whispering. Reporters came asking questions, but he didn't care about the attention. What he couldn't shake was the feeling. The moment their eyes met, his and the tiger's, the sanctuary was flooded with calls from zoologists, skeptics, believers, and conservationists. Everyone wanted answers. Could it have been maternal instinct? Has this tiger had contact with humans before? Is there a religious or symbolic meaning to this? Aru gave no theories. He simply repeated what he saw. The tiger was calm. The girl was not afraid, and they had been together for hours without a single scratch. It wasn't science he was clinging to. It was something quieter, something sacred. When Mira was asked about what happened in the forest, her answers were simple. I got lost. I sat down to cry. Then the tiger came. She said it with no drama, no exaggeration. He didn't make noise. He just looked at me. I thought maybe he'd eat me, but he didn't. He laid down beside me. The room would go silent when she said it, her voice matter of fact. He let me lean on him. His fur was warm. I wasn't scared anymore after that. Her mother would look at her, eyes full of disbelief and tears, trying to understand how such peace could come from such danger. Behind closed doors, some officials wanted the tiger tracked down. It's still a wild animal, they argued, unpredictable. It could hurt someone next time. Others pushed back. It showed no aggression. If anything, it prevented harm. The debate intensified, but the truth remained. There were no recent tiger attacks in the region, and no signs of abnormal behavior. No livestock gone missing, no injuries, just one child found safe, and one animal no one could locate again. The jungle had kept its secret. Aru returned to work a few days later. The sanctuary felt different now. He was no longer invisible. People asked him questions. Children followed him around, wanting to hear about the tiger. He didn't say much, but when he did, they listened. One boy asked him, "Weren't you scared?" And Aru paused before answering. "Yes," he said, "but not of the tiger. I was scared I'd be too late." And somehow, those words carried more weight than any scientific explanation could have. Mira's father invited Aru to dinner. At first, he refused politely, too modest, too shy, but eventually accepted. That evening, over dal and rice, Mira sat beside him and drew a picture, her, the tiger, and Aru all standing under a big tree. When she handed it to him, he stared at it for a long time. "You drew me smiling," he said quietly. She nodded. "Because you were," she said. And maybe, for the first time in years, he really had been. The sanctuary installed a new sign at the forest's edge a week later. It was small, simple, just an image of a tiger and a child, hand-drawn, with the words, "Protect what protects us." Some villagers scoffed at the sentimentality, but most nodded silently when they passed. Something had changed, not just for Mira or for Aru, but for everyone who had grown up fearing the jungle. Maybe it wasn't only a place of danger. Maybe it was also a place of mercy. And somewhere in that vast green expanse, the tigress still walked, unseen, untagged, her path unknowable. But one thing had become clear to Aru, something he hadn't felt in a long time. His son had died in those same woods. And yet, the forest had returned another child to the world, not in vengeance, but in grace. That day, the jungle had given something back, not just a life, but a purpose. 3 days after the incident, a government truck arrived at the sanctuary with 2 forest officers and a wildlife biologist. They had a simple directive: find the tiger, track it, observe it, and if necessary, relocate it to a secure reserve before something happened. "She may not have harmed the girl," said Officer Desai, "but the next encounter might not end the same way." Aru stood nearby, listening. He didn't speak, not yet, but something twisted in his chest at the idea of that tiger being locked away because she had shown compassion. The team set up motion cameras and scattered bait stations, hoping to catch a glimpse of the animal. They showed Mira several images of tigers taken from the region over the past year, asking if any looked familiar. She pointed without hesitation. "This one." "That's him." They were puzzled. The tiger in the photo was female. At least 10 years old, scar above her right eye. Known as T108 in their database. "She's not known for human contact," said the biologist. "She's solitary, aggressive toward other tigers. This behavior doesn't match her profile." That night, Aru sat alone in the equipment shed, staring at the image of T108 on a clipboard. The scar above her eye was unmistakable. That same eye had locked onto his in the clearing, not with rage, but with something wiser. He remembered how the animal had allowed him to approach, how it had waited for him. It hadn't been confused. It had chosen to stay beside Mira. "What if she knew?" he whispered aloud. "What if she felt something we don't understand?" But there was no one in the room to answer. Meanwhile, villagers were divided. Some now called the tiger a guardian spirit, Rakshika Devi, they said, protector of the innocent. Others feared she would return with less mercy. Parents began keeping their children home from school. Tour guides canceled jungle walks. Even the butterfly sanctuary posted a closure notice. "If that tiger's still out there," one man said, "she's not our pet. She's a predator. Next time it could be worse." The fear spread faster than the facts, and it began to suffocate the gratitude people had once felt. One morning, a ranger came to Aru holding a tablet. A blurry photo had been captured on a camera trap. The tiger. She was alive, healthy, and walking past a stream just 5 kilometers from where Mira was found. "She's still in the area," the ranger said. "She's staying close." That's unusual. The officials saw it as a sign of danger. Aru saw something else. "She's watching," he said under his breath. "She's staying to make sure we kept our promise." The ranger raised an eyebrow. "Promise?" Aru didn't explain. Some truths couldn't be argued with data. The next day, Mira drew another picture. This one showed the tiger inside a cage, looking out through iron bars. When her mother asked what it meant, Mira's lips trembled. "That's what they'll do to her, right?" she asked. "Put her somewhere she can't help anyone else." Her mother held her, unsure what to say. Aru visited that night. When he saw the drawing, his expression changed. "She shouldn't carry this fear," he said. "Not her. Not after what she went through." That was when he made his decision, quietly, irrevocably. The next morning, before the forest officers could begin their search grid, Aru left a handwritten note and disappeared into the jungle alone. He took nothing but a flashlight, a small canteen, and the same path that had led him to Mira days before. He knew every inch of that terrain, every turn of the roots, every bend in the trail. And he walked with purpose, not to capture, not to run, but to find her, to see her again. To face the very force that had somehow reopened his heart. As the sun climbed higher and the heat thickened, Aru moved through the trees like a man with nothing left to lose. He called out gently, not in command, but in invitation. "I know you're near," he said aloud. "You stayed for her. Now stay for me." He stopped at the banyan tree where they had met. Sat down slowly, waited. Hours passed. Monkeys howled in the distance. Leaves whispered, sweat poured down his back. But he didn't move. "You gave her a chance," he murmured. "Let me give you one." Back at the sanctuary, panic broke out. Aaron's note was found by a volunteer. It simply read, "Some debts must be repaid in person. Do not follow me." The officers were furious. "He's interfering in a high-risk operation," Desai shouted. "If that tiger kills him, we'll be blamed." Mira's mother, hearing the news, didn't say a word. She simply closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. She knew. Somehow, she knew Aru wasn't walking into danger. He was walking into something he needed, something unfinished inside him. Evening fell. In the forest, light filtered through the leaves in golden strands. Aru remained seated, his legs numb, his hands folded. He had no weapons, no tranquilizers, no intention of winning a battle. Only the wish to be truly seen by the same animal who had changed everything. Then, just as the last bird call echoed through the trees, he heard it. Soft, deliberate footsteps, the rustle of grass. He didn't look up immediately. He didn't need to. The forest had gone quiet again, like it had the first time. When he finally raised his eyes, she was there. 20 feet away, her silhouette outlined in shadow and light. The scar above her eye caught a beam of sunlight and shimmered. She stood still, head tilted slightly, as if studying him. Aru didn't speak, didn't move. His heart beat once, hard, then slowed. And as he watched, the tigress walked forward, not menacing, not aggressive. Just present, she circled halfway around him, then laid down, close. Not close enough to touch, but close enough for trust. The world seemed to pause. In that moment, Aru didn't see a predator. He saw a creature that had endured, that had made choices, that had felt something inexplicable and acted on it. They sat like that for nearly 30 minutes, no noise, no fear. When the first star blinked through the canopy above, Aru stood. The tigress watched him rise. He bowed his head slightly, the same silent gesture he'd made the first time. Then, without a word, he turned and began walking back. The tigress remained, unmoving, until he was gone. He returned to the sanctuary after midnight, mud-covered, exhausted, but calm. When asked what happened, he said simply, "She's not lost. She's free," and that was the end of the matter for him. He made no formal report, refused to be part of the tagging operation. Told the officers they could search if they wanted, but they'd never find her unless she allowed it. And Mira, hearing he had gone to the forest alone, smiled for the first time in days. "She came to him too," she whispered. "I knew she would." The next morning, a meeting was held at the sanctuary between the local forest department, sanctuary administrators, and visiting conservationists. There was pressure from regional officials to act quickly. "We can't have a free-roaming tiger that approaches humans," said one bureaucrat firmly. "If this happens again, and someone is hurt, it will be on all of us." Aru sat in the back of the room, silent. His presence wasn't requested, but no one dared ask him to leave. After all, he was the only one who had faced her twice and returned. Some staff wanted to fight back. They argued the tiger hadn't attacked, that she had shown extraordinary restraint. Others pointed out that behavior like this could be a symptom of illness or disorientation. It's dangerous to assume benevolence in wild animals, said one senior ecologist. She's still a tiger, but every time the debate shifted toward fear, Aru would look up, and the room would go quiet again. His silence had become a kind of anchor, something unspoken but deeply respected. Mira's mother made an unexpected appearance that day. She walked into the meeting hall holding a folder with a crayon drawing inside. Her daughter's tiger, calm and peaceful, lying beside her. "My daughter was not afraid," she said, voice trembling. "You talk about risk and statistics. But none of that explains what happened. All I know is, my little girl came back to me because that animal chose not to harm her. I won't let you punish it for that." Her words stunned the room. It was no longer just a debate between professionals. Later that afternoon, a local TV crew arrived. Somehow, word had gotten out about Aaron's solo trip into the forest. A reporter with glossy hair and a bright microphone cornered him outside the staff cabins. "Is it true you made contact with the tiger again?" she asked, her cameraman already rolling. Aru blinked against the glare. "It's not contact," he said carefully. "It's acknowledgement. She saw me. I saw her. And we both walked away." The clip would go viral by nightfall, shared by thousands across the country. Back at home, Mira asked her parents if they thought the tiger had once been hurt by people. "Maybe she learned to fear us less," she said. Her mother stroked her hair gently. "Or maybe she saw a part of herself in you, lost, alone, needing someone to stay close." Mira didn't respond right away. She simply looked out the window at the distant line of trees. "If they catch her, will they take her far away?" she asked. Her father's eyes welled up. "We don't know, sweet one. But we'll do everything we can." Pressure continued to build. International wildlife organizations issued statements encouraging non-lethal monitoring. Local politicians, facing scrutiny, pushed for action that would appear decisive. A team with tranquilizer equipment was stationed near the sanctuary entrance. Aru passed them every morning, offering a brief nod, but never stopping. He had resumed his usual duties, feeding the birds, watering the gardens, but those who watched him closely noticed he had changed, more focused, more alive. Late one night, Aru was visited by Dr. Sahana Rao, the sanctuary's lead veterinarian. She had been watching everything unfold in silence. She said, sitting beside him under the banyan tree on the sanctuary grounds, "I've studied big cats for 20 years. Never seen anything like this, but I believe you." "And I believe her." Aru said nothing for a moment. Then he whispered, "I didn't go there to be brave. I went because I owed her something. Because she showed me something I had forgotten, that life still chooses us, even when we stop choosing it." Sahana nodded slowly. "But the world doesn't understand that kind of language," she said. "It wants proof, data, footage." Aru gave a faint smile. "What if the proof is a child who's still alive?" She looked at him, then away. "They won't stop." "That." Aaron's gaze turned back toward the trees. "Then maybe we don't stop either." And with that, the quiet decision was made. If they came for her, he would be ready. Not with weapons, but with witnesses, with voices, with truth. Mira's story began to spread far beyond the region. National newspapers ran editorials titled "The Tiger Who Waited" and "Wild Mercy in Kiripur." Wildlife photographers came from across the country, hoping to capture even a glimpse of the animal, but she didn't show herself. Not once. It was as if she had vanished into the very heartbeat of the forest, watching from a distance, waiting to see if the world had learned anything from her act of restraint. And in that absence, her presence only grew. Then came a letter from a high-level official in the Ministry of Environment. It authorized a controlled capture operation, scheduled for the following week. Helicopters, darts, full relocation. Aru read the letter 3 times. "They want to erase her," he said quietly to Sahana. "Erase the part that doesn't fit." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "What do we do?" Aru folded the letter slowly. "We make sure the world remembers her before they can rewrite her into a threat." The countdown had begun. Aru reached out to Mira's parents. He asked if they would let their daughter speak publicly. At first, they hesitated. She was still recovering, still fragile. But Mira was the one who insisted. "If they won't listen to grown-ups," she said, "maybe they'll listen to me." A press conference was organized at the sanctuary courtyard. Small, intimate. No flashy lights. Just a few chairs, a microphone, and a child's voice telling the truth the way only a child can, simply, purely, without agenda. I was scared when I got lost, Mira told the small crowd. I thought no one would find me, but then I saw her. She looked big and scary, but she didn't hurt me. She sat beside me. She kept the wild pigs away. She didn't let me feel alone. Her voice didn't shake. I think she knew I was a little girl, not a threat. So maybe we should remember that she wasn't a threat either. Her words rippled through the gathered adults like a stone dropped in still water. And for a moment, everyone was silent. That night, Aru stood at the edge of the forest with a flashlight in his hand, not to shine, but to signal. He raised the light once, then turned it off, waited, then once more. It was an old code used by trackers, a nonverbal invitation. He didn't expect a response, but deep in the trees, he saw movement. A shadow, then stillness. He smiled. You're watching, aren't you? He whispered, you know what's coming, but you also know we're not done yet. The forest rustled, but no footsteps followed. Just the night, 2 days before the scheduled operation, something unexpected happened. The tracking team found all their bait sites untouched, not a single mark, not a single paw print. The camera traps wiped clean, batteries drained. One was even found crushed, not by accident, but deliberately. She knows, the head of the team said, baffled. She's avoiding us, outsmarting us. Aru simply nodded. She was never ours to catch, and yet, he feared what might happen next if they insisted on trying. The final decision came down to a panel of 5 forest officials. They met behind closed doors, debating science, politics, and risk. But something strange happened. One by one, they had each spoken to someone affected by the event. A mother, a child, a groundskeeper. And what they heard was not fear, it was reverence. Eventually, the youngest official said, if we act now, we remove the only tiger who ever chose not to be a predator. That sentence hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. The next morning, a single-page announcement was posted at the sanctuary gate. The relocation operation has been postponed indefinitely pending further observation. Aru read it with steady eyes. He folded the paper once, placed it in his pocket, and walked toward the butterfly garden where Mira sat feeding sugar water to a monarch on her palm. She gets to stay, Mira asked. Aru smiled, eyes soft. She always belonged here. We're the ones who had to decide whether we did too. The jungle breathed easier in the days that followed the announcement. There were still cameras, still rangers patrolling, but the energy had shifted. Less tension, less urgency. The threat of forced relocation had passed, for now. And although the tiger never appeared again so openly, the people closest to her story felt her presence in ways that couldn't be measured. Mira returned to school. Aru returned to silence. And the forest, vast and indifferent, held them both like a long, quiet exhale. Mira was different now, her teachers said. Quieter, more focused. When classmates asked about the tiger, she didn't boast. She would just smile and say she was kind. That was all. But something in her had changed. Her confidence, her way of listening, even her drawings. Every notebook page had curved lines now, lines, stripes, leaves, cats in the background. She sees the world differently, her mother whispered once to Aru, like something sacred is hiding in plain sight. He nodded. He understood exactly what that felt like. Aru, too, had changed. He no longer skipped meals or spoke only in nods. He began waking earlier, feeding the animals before sunrise, walking the perimeters with more care than ever before. One day, a staff member noticed him talking, not just to a bird or a monkey, but to the forest itself. He thinks it can hear him, the staffer joked. But when others saw it, they didn't laugh. There was something honest in it, something ancient. Aru had found a language again, not with words, but with presence. One afternoon, a group of school children visited the sanctuary. Mira was among them, and the guide asked if she wanted to say a few words. She hesitated, then stood in front of her classmates, hands clasped tight. I think the jungle is like a big heart, she said. It can be scary and loud, but sometimes it also hides kindness where we don't expect it. Her classmates were silent. Even the guide was surprised. Thank you, he said softly. And after that, the group walked through the trees more slowly, more carefully. Dr. Sahanan noticed something odd in the sanctuary's veterinary records. The older birds, the wounded macaques, even the injured civets, they were recovering faster. "It's like something's shifted," she said to Aru. "They're healing more willingly." He didn't respond at first. Then he said, "Maybe peace is contagious. Maybe if you show it once, others remember how to find it." She smiled at him. "Or maybe they just feel safer now." He didn't disagree. For the first time in years, safety wasn't just a theory, it was something he carried in his chest. In the village, stories started to emerge. Not wild tales or exaggerations, but quiet moments. A herd of deer crossing a road without panic, a leopard seen drinking from a stream beside a farmer's oxen. The old men said the jungle was softening. The elders claimed it was the tiger's doing. "She's reminding the forest how to live with us," one woman said at the market. Whether true or not, the stories mattered. They shaped belief. And belief, in places like Karipur, often mattered more than facts. A visiting journalist returned to the sanctuary to write a follow-up piece. She asked Aru for an interview. He agreed, but with one condition: no recording. Just a walk through the trees. They spoke little, but what she wrote later moved thousands. "He did not speak like a man who feared tigers," she wrote. "He spoke like someone who had been forgiven by one. And perhaps, through her, had learned to forgive himself." The article was reprinted across the country. Aru didn't read it, but he folded a copy and placed it in his late son's journal. The sanctuary director approved a new mural for the visitor center. Local artists were invited to submit ideas. The final piece was unveiled in front of the community. It showed a young girl asleep under the outstretched paw of a great tigress, and standing behind them, a silent man with his hand over his heart. The crowd applauded, but it was the stillness after that applause, the long, reflective pause, that said everything. Mira ran her fingers across the painted stripes. "She's still here," she whispered. One evening, while walking the outer perimeter, Aru noticed something strange: a half-eaten boar carcass neatly placed beside a clearing. No signs of struggle, no broken plants, just the remains, like an offering. He stood there a long time, staring into the trees. Then he knelt and whispered, "Thank you." He didn't know why he said it. Or maybe he did. Some gestures weren't for humans to understand. They were only meant to be witnessed, to be honored. The forest department, surprisingly, reduced patrols in the area where the tiger was last seen. Officially, it was a resource decision. Unofficially, it was respect. "Let her have her space," one officer said. "She's earned it." That comment wasn't on any report, but it was passed from ranger to ranger like gospel. Rules bent slightly, quietly. Sometimes, it only takes one story to change an entire culture of fear. And now, Karipur had one that no one could forget, even if they tried. One morning, Aru found Mira waiting at the sanctuary gate with a small backpack and a wide smile. "Mama said I could help today," she said, eyes shining. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. She followed him through the early mist, matching his steps. That day, they watered orchids, cleaned feeding stations, and refilled bird baths. No one interrupted them. It was like watching something ancient and simple, a ritual being passed on without a single word. At one point, Mira stopped and said, "You walk like the tiger." Aru only smiled. In the break room, two younger workers discussed how Aru had changed. He never used to talk to anyone, just nodded and walked past. The other replied, "Now it feels like he sees people. Really sees them." It was true. The loss that had once made him invisible now made him attentive. He noticed when someone was tired, when someone needed help but wouldn't ask. The tiger hadn't just spared a child. She had restored something in a man who had forgotten what it meant to connect. Mira began writing small notes and leaving them near the sanctuary's trees. They weren't addressed to anyone in particular. Just folded pages with short messages. "Thank you for protecting me. I'm not scared anymore. I hope you're not lonely." Aru discovered one by accident while trimming branches. He held it in his calloused hands for a long time, then folded it back and placed it carefully under a stone. Not everything needed to be collected. Some words were meant to live quietly among the leaves. News of the sanctuary's story continued to ripple outward. A documentary crew contacted the administration. They wanted to film Mira and Aru, to tell the tale of the girl and the tiger. The request was declined. "This story doesn't belong to cameras," said the director. Aru agreed. Let it stay where it happened. Let it stay honest. But something else happened. Donations began to pour in, from schools, from wildlife clubs, from elderly couples moved by the story. A sign was put up near the gate. Because one life was spared, many others will be protected. One afternoon, Mira asked Aru if the tiger might visit again. "Maybe not like before," he said, "but she's watching. The jungle has its own eyes." Mira looked around slowly, then smiled. "Then I'll wave anyway." And she did, toward nothing, toward everything. And in that moment, the forest felt not wild, not tame, but aware. Something beyond the human world had paused to listen. They stood there together, in silence. No camera could capture it. No report could explain it, but it was real. Sahana began working on a new outreach program for local schools. She wanted children to learn about tigers not just as predators, but as beings with agency, instincts, even choice. She called the program The Watchers, and invited Aru to speak at the first session. He declined at first, but when he arrived and saw the children, wide-eyed, open-hearted, he agreed. He didn't talk much, just told them what happened. And when one child asked, "Were you scared?" Aru said, "I was. But then she looked at me, and I wasn't." At night, Mira began having dreams, not nightmares, but vivid memories. In one, she was lost again, but the tiger was made of light. In another, Aru was walking beside the tiger, both of them silent, both of them glowing. She would wake and tell her mother, who always listened with a soft face. "What do you think it means?" Mira would ask. Her mother never gave an answer. Some dreams weren't puzzles to solve, they were gifts, to be carried and respected, like stories whispered by the jungle itself. Villagers who once feared the forest began returning to its edges. Some brought food for the monkeys, others left water for the birds. A few simply came to sit and breathe. The sanctuary started offering guided silent walks, no talking, no flash photography, just presence. They called them listening hours. People wept quietly during those walks. Not because of the jungle, but because of what they remembered about themselves in the stillness. Aru led those walks twice a week. He never said much. He didn't need to. One day, Aru took Mira to a part of the sanctuary he rarely visited, the memorial garden. It was small, with stones engraved with the names of lost animals. In the far corner, behind a hibiscus bush, was a single unmarked stone. "Is this for your son?" Mira asked gently, or nodded. "I didn't want his name to be a wound." Mira knelt and placed a single feather on the stone. "Then let it be a promise," she whispered. Aru looked away, eyes glistening. Somehow, without trying, she had given him back a piece of what he thought was lost forever. A month after the tiger's last appearance, a set of fresh tracks was found near the sanctuary's southern edge. Clear, deliberate, and moving away, not toward the village, but deeper into the reserve. The rangers took photos but made no attempt to follow. "She's drawing a line," one said. "Let's not cross it." The images were posted on the staff board, and below them, someone wrote in marker, "Still watching." No one erased it. No one needed to. It was the truth now, unspoken, but deeply believed. No fences were ever built. No trackers ever returned. The tiger was never seen again, not directly, not in the way people wanted. But her presence lingered in quiet ways. Trees that once felt menacing now felt alive. Birds returned to long-abandoned nesting spots. Even the local farmers reported fewer conflicts with wildlife. "It's like everything took a breath," one man said. Like the jungle let go of something it had been holding too tightly, and in the middle of it all stood a girl, a man, and a silence that healed. Aru never called her a miracle. He didn't need to. To him, the tiger was not magic. She was real. Her power wasn't in what she did. It was in what she chose not to do. She had held the power of life and death in her body, and she had chosen restraint. In a world that celebrated force, this creature had offered something different: mercy. That was the legacy Aru protected now, not with speeches or politics, but with how he walked, how he watched, and how he taught others to do the same. Mira's life slowly returned to normal, or something like it. She still climbed trees and scraped her knees, still argued about bedtime. But there was something in her gaze now, something calm and uncheckable. When other children panicked, she stayed composed. When animals flinched, she moved slowly. She carries something, her teacher said one day. The tiger gave her a piece of herself, and it stayed. Her parents saw it too. Not trauma, not fear, just awareness. A knowledge that couldn't be untaught. One afternoon, during the dry season, Mira brought Aru a clay sculpture she had made at school. It was rough and uneven, a girl curled up beside a tiger, both sleeping peacefully. I know it's not perfect, she said. Aru looked at it, then at her. It's more than perfect, he replied. It's true. He placed it on the shelf beside his son's old photographs. That night, for the first time in years, Aru lit a candle for Aemon, not from grief, but from gratitude. He would have liked you, he whispered into the flame. The sanctuary continued to grow. New volunteers arrived, inspired by the story they had read online. Some came from cities, others from villages. They asked the same questions at first: is the tiger still here? But after a few weeks, the question changed to, what can I do to help? And that was the shift Aru had hoped for. The tiger had changed how people saw the forest. Now, people were learning how to change their place within it. Not as masters, not as intruders, but as stewards, as witnesses. Sahana gave a lecture at an environmental summit. She told the story without embellishment, just the facts. But at the end, she paused and said, this wasn't a story about conservation. It was about choice. A tiger made one, so did a man. And so did a child. Every person in this room will face their own tiger one day. When that happens, ask yourself, will you run, or will you stay beside what scares you long enough to understand it? The room stayed silent for several long minutes after she stepped down. The government eventually passed a resolution: no relocation without aggression. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was something. A shift, a seed. The region became a case study in coexistence. Wildlife departments from other countries requested visits. But no one, not even the most curious among them, ever saw the tiger again. She had made her point. And in doing so, had left something behind far more powerful than her presence. A change in how people chose to look at fear, and power, and mercy. One day, years later, a boy came to the sanctuary with his school group. He stood in front of the mural, the one with the girl, the tiger, and the man, and turned to Aru, now older but still walking the paths. Is it true? The boy asked. All of it? Aru looked at the mural for a moment, then he nodded. Yes, every part. The boy squinted. Even the part where she didn't attack, Aru smiled. Especially that part, because that was the moment the story became legend, not from drama, but from restraint. As Aru walked away that day, King tapping gently on the ground, he passed the banyan tree where it all began. A new plaque had been placed there, no dates, no names. Just 5 words carved into the stone. She stayed. So he returned. That's all it said. But everyone who read it understood. It wasn't about ownership. It wasn't about fear. It was about how one act of patience, one animal choosing to wait, had pulled a grieving man back into the world and placed a child safely back in her mother's arms. The final story Aru ever told was to Mira, now almost grown, standing beside him during a late afternoon patrol. The first time I walked into that forest, he said, I was walking toward death, not away from it. Mira looked up, surprised. But you came back, Aru nodded. Because she let me. He paused, then added, and because you were there. Your life pulled me back, her choice made it possible. But you made it necessary. Mira took his hand without a word. And they walked on together, into the shade. The jungle never gave up all its secrets. It never told why the tiger did what she did. But the people who lived near it stopped needing that answer. They had seen enough, heard enough, felt enough. The tiger had not just saved a child. She had redrawn the line between fear and reverence, between instinct and compassion. And in doing so, she gave a new kind of story to the world, not one of teeth and claws, but of silence, presence, and a moment that changed everything. Mira, now a wildlife educator, tells children that nature sometimes offers second chances, but not in the way we expect, she says. It's not about being rescued. It's about being witnessed, understood, accepted, even in our most frightened moments. The children ask, did the tiger really stay beside you all night? And she always answers, yes. And that night, I think she was watching over both of us. Me and the man who had forgotten how to feel. She says it calmly, like a fact of life. Each year, on the anniversary of the rescue, a small group walks silently to the banyan tree. They bring feathers, leaves, stones, nothing artificial, just gifts of the forest. Some speak, others don't. Some light candles, others sit in silence. But all of them come with the same feeling, that something once happened here that bent the rules of nature without breaking them. That's what legacy looks like when it comes from a creature too wild to tame and too wise to be forgotten. The sanctuary now trains dozens of rangers annually. Aaron's notes became a manual for how to approach wildlife not just with caution, but with humility. Look, listen, and leave room for the unexpected. One passage reads, "Nature is not a machine. Sometimes it chooses grace. Those who read it the first time don't always understand. But by the end of their training, they carry that line like a compass. It's not procedure, it's something deeper, a way of being." Mira eventually visited a national summit where she shared the stage with global conservation leaders. Her talk was short, only 5 minutes. But no one in the room forgot what she said. The tiger didn't save me because I was special. She saved me because she could. And she chose to. In a world driven by instinct, that choice mattered more than any roar, any leap, any headline. It was, in its own quiet way, the bravest thing the tiger ever did. As the years went by, the memory of the event didn't fade, it evolved, from survival to story, from fear to wisdom. Aru passed away quietly in his sleep, a notebook on his chest and the sound of birds outside his window. At his memorial, Mira stood and said, "He didn't just save a girl. He remembered who he was and helped others do the same." The room wept, not for the loss, but for the fullness of what had been returned. And somewhere, deep in the forest, beyond the reach of cameras and traps, a tigress rests. Older now, slower, maybe, but still watching, still choosing. Because in one unforgettable moment, she didn't act like a predator. She acted like something else entirely, a guardian, a witness, and a turning point in the life of a man, a child, and a world that so often forgets the power of stillness. She didn't just spare a child, she gave a grieving man back to himself.